Hey, I actually want to, dads are kind of funny. Dads see life and parenting different, and they have their own stories. I want to read you a couple tweets from dads. Is that all right? They're short. Says this, one dad says, I accidentally dripped some mustard on my newborn daughter's forehead. And a long story short, a nurse just walked in and watched me lick the baby. Oh, that's such a good one. All right, here's another one. Dad. Good night, kids. Kids. Good night, Dad. Dad. Good night, monster that eats children who are bad. Wife threw a radio underneath the bed. Good night. Oh, I want to try that. Okay. 5-year-old. Daddy, can I tell you a secret? Dad, sure thing, buddy. 5-year-old grabs Dad by the face, pulls him in close, whispers, I just pooped and I didn't wash my hands. Oh, dude. Okay, Dad, I constantly Google how to put your kids up for adoption so my kids can find it on my search history and know I'm not messing around. Son, Dad, am I adopted? Dad, not yet, but we're hopeful. All right, this is the last one I'm going to read. This is a dad. I finally got some time away from the kids, 2 whole hours. It would have been longer, but my legs went numb crouching behind the dryer. All right. Guys, parenting can be fun, can't it? And horrible all at the same time. It's like one of the most rewarding and thankless jobs that we can do, but it can be an absolute blast. I have 5 kids, so I know about all the fun that we can have while parenting. Today, I want to talk about both parenting and fatherhood. We're going to start first on parenting and how the devil tries to attack our kids, and then we're going to move on to fatherhood. And I'm reminded that when I was living in the house with my dad, when my dad was parenting over me, I'm reminded how he would put us to bed. And you got to remember, as we parent, we get better, don't we? Right? Your first kid, anybody had first kid syndrome? Lots of us, right? First kid cries, we're running into the room to find out. By the 5th kid, you're like, we need to soundproof that place. Lock the door, padlocks, doesn't matter. As we parent, we start to realize how to do things a little bit better. And when I lived at home, my dad would say, go to bed. And my brother Bryce and I, there's only 2 of us, we'd go into our rooms, put our pajamas on, brush our teeth, and get in bed. And that's at least how I remember it, right? With my kids, it doesn't work like that. When I say, guys, go to bed, go downstairs and go to bed, I am assured 4 things are going to happen. They are not going to brush their teeth. I've said, go brush your teeth, go put your pajamas on, get in bed. I'm assured 4 things are going to happen. They're not going to brush their teeth. They're not going to put their pajamas on. They're not going to get in bed, and they're just going to fight. You guys have the same kids that I do? And so I've had to learn how to, what routine works for us. So what I do now, I found out a routine that works really well. I send 2 of them downstairs and I say, okay, you go brush your teeth. You go put your pajamas on. When you're done putting your pajamas on and you're brushing your teeth, you can cross paths. Don't look at each other. Don't talk to each other. Ignore each other completely. Go to the other side. Then you brush your teeth. You put your pajamas on. You go in bed. Yell when you're done, and I'll send the next crew down. As we parent, we start to understand how to do things the best way that fits the kids that we have. Well, the enemy has done the same thing. The enemy has been around for thousands and thousands of years on this earth trying to win kids over. And he has done things and he has tried things, and then he has come across the things that work the best. You guys know people don't change very much, right? Times change, technology changes, but people pretty much stay the same. And the enemy has found ways that work really good at getting to our kids, and he hasn't changed them because he hasn't needed to. I want to read something. Ephesians 6:16 says. Ephesians 6:16, this is talking about putting on the full armor of God. And it says, in addition to all, taking up the shield of faith with which you will be able to extinguish all the what? All the flaming arrows of the evil one. See, I want to explain something. The devil, he's got these arrows in his quiver, and he doesn't have to change them. He's learned over hundreds and thousands of generations what works. And he just keeps taking out those arrows and sending them into situations in the same way with great success. And I want to look today I want to look at 3 of these arrows that he uses against our kids. We find the secret to these arrows in Daniel 1. Daniel 1, it's like a strategy plan that the devil has to win over our kids. And the truth that we find is that the strategy that he uses in Daniel 1 is the exact same strategy that he uses today. And don't you know that when you know the devil's plans, when you know his plans, it's way easier to defend, isn't it? So we're going to look at 3 arrows that the enemy shoots at our kids. Does that sound good? My papers are messed up. We're going to look into Daniel 1. We're going to get a glimpse at these 3 arrows that he uses. Now, first, let me explain. Daniel starts off the book when the southern kingdom of Judah falls. The northern kingdom had already fallen about 130 years earlier to the Assyrians because they went into wicked ways and God gave them over to the Assyrians. The same thing is happening with the southern kingdom of Judah. They started walking in the wicked ways, and so God gave over Judah to a nation called Babylon, and under the rule of a king named Nebuchadnezzar. Say Nebuchadnezzar. Always say it, never try spelling it. It's so difficult. In fact, I have it in my notes, it says Nebi, because I just don't care. And in this, Nebuchadnezzar does something. Nebuchadnezzar goes to the nations that he conquers, and he takes out the brightest and he takes out the smartest. He brings them back to Babylon, where he lived, where he's going to assimilate them into his palace and into his nation and his city, so that they would have all of this wisdom and insight there. But before it's going to be successful, Nebuchadnezzar understands that he needs to break these young people of who they were. He needs to break them of their belief system, of what they know to be right and wrong, of their religion, if he's going to make them successful for him, if he is going to mold them in his ways. And here we find in Daniel 1 those 3 arrows that the enemy uses, that King Nebuchadnezzar is going to use. So let's go ahead and read Daniel 1, 3 through 7. And maybe you can find what these arrows are. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal family. So he's going to go through this list of who are these brightest and smartest that he's taking from Israel back to Babylon, including some of the royal family of the nobles, youth in whom was no defect, who were good-looking, showing intelligence in every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge. So this was kind of like a leave Mike, take Neil type of deal going on. I'm just kidding. I'm the dumb one. Okay. And who had the ability for serving in the king's court. And he ordered him to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king appointed for them a daily ration from the king's choice what? Choice what? Food, and from the wine which he drank, and he appointed that they should be what? Educated 3 years, at the end of which they were to enter the king's personal service. Now among them from the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, and Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials assigned new what? Names to them. And to Daniel, he assigned the name Belshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. And to Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. My dad used to always tell us it was to bed we go. And he thought that was really funny. And here I am now, saying it from the stage. Okay, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Now, it's easy to miss what good old Nebi was doing here. It's easy to overlook these 3 things that he did, but when you focus in on them, you see that they were pointed things. What were the 3 things that he did? He educated them. He, what? I forget already. He gave them choice foods, and he gave them new names. Now, why did he do that? Did he do it because they were stupid, skinny, and had dorky names? No, I mean, Mishael is a horrible name for a man, right? It sounds like Michelle. But, and I apologize if any men in here are named Michelle. But he didn't do it because they were skinny and had dorky names. It was a plan, a strategy, a recipe, a purpose. It was exactly what he wanted to do, because Nebi knew that if he could be successful in these three things, that he would disarm these youths of anything that they knew. He knew that if he could break them in these three areas, that he would have them. So what are these three areas? What does education, food, and names have to do with anything? Well, we're going to get into it right now. The first arrow that we see that the enemy points at our kids, that the enemy pointed at those kids, is found in verses 4 and 5. Let's go ahead and read those. It says this, it says, Nebuchadnezzar ordered him to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. And then again in verse 5, he says, Nebuchadnezzar appointed that they should be educated for 3 years. Now remember, we're not talking about education. Can I tell you what we're talking about? Re-education. There's a difference, isn't there? He wants to re-educate. The arrow right here we find is our first arrow, the arrow of a new world view. See, Nebuchadnezzar knew that the way that we look at things are the compass of our life. And if he could change the worldview, then he can start pointing these kids in an entirely different direction that he wanted them to look. He could change the way they viewed life and change their values and change their beliefs and change what they believe is right and wrong. Now, it's important for us to understand what kind of people we're talking about. The Bible says that these were youths in whom there was no defects. And the word for youth is the word yeled, and the word yeled is actually an age range starting all the way at 14 years old. So he was re-educating them in these formative years of their life. In those years, it shapes what we believe. Education shapes what we believe about ourselves, doesn't it? What we believe about God, what we believe about the world around us. In those years, we start to understand our purpose, why we exist, and we start to come in who we believe ourselves to be. And for the Israelites, all of those things were understood under the Old Testament prophets and the scriptures of what God said about them, that they were chosen. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was coming out with his first arrow, the new worldview, because he needed to break them of who they believed that they were. And he needed to fill their minds with something else so that they would become moldable and moldable to his wishes and his desires. Let me ask you right now, have you guys seen the re-education that's going on inside of America? There is an absolute re-education that is going on pointed at our kids. Schools, TV, movie, media, they are not the same as when many of you guys went to school. There is a re-education going on inside. They are re-educating our Christian kids to become Babylonians. In schools, they're taught that there is no God. They're taught that evolution is the main focus. And because you're just an accident, that your greatest desire should be your own pleasure. Do whatever feels good. We're told that there is no real truth, that there is no concrete right or wrong. It's made up to your own experience. We don't even know what it means to be a boy or a girl anymore. Biology doesn't matter. There is no God. He doesn't get to decide. In fact, often standing up for Judeo-Christian ideas in school will get you sent to the principal's office. You know that? Because there's a re-education going on with things like the 1619 Project or critical race theory, or this idea that America was never founded on Christian principles. Can I tell you right now, you want to know why America's great? Because it was founded on Christian principles by Christian men and Christian founders. And the only reason is why we're great is because we walked in his ways. And now they're trying to take all that away. I'll tell you this, there's a great re-education arrow, the arrow of a new worldview that is pointed at our kids, and we need to see these arrows if we are to defend against them. Let's go into the next arrow, okay? The first arrow is the arrow of a new worldview. The second arrow we find in verse 5, it says this. It says, the king appointed for them a daily ration from the king's choice, what? And from the wine which he drank. Now, this doesn't make a lot of sense right now. It's just food, isn't it? But you have to remember the Israelites, they had very strict dietary laws. See this arrow right here? And you can look at it from 14,000 feet as the arrow of culture. He's introducing new culture to them. But I want to zoom in on in culture, and I want to focus on something specific. This is the arrow of compromise. Just little compromise. The arrow of little compromise. The Israelites had a strict diet that they were supposed to follow. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was not trying to get them to fully deny God's existence with big compromise. He was looking for little compromise. The Israelites were only allowed to eat the food that God deemed clean. And they were supposed to follow that. They were not supposed to eat anything unclean. There's lots of reasons that God placed this up. But Nebuchadnezzar comes out and he puts out this entire smorgasbord of food. He wasn't trying to get them to do some big, gigantic sin, kill someone, fornicate. He just wanted little compromise, and he said, I want you guys to eat this. And he probably made it look really good. Yeah. I understand you're not supposed to eat this, but this is food that makes you strong. This is food that feeds your muscles. If you don't eat this, you will grow weak. You're not in the land of Israel. You're in the land of Babylonians, and as long as you're here, I am going to feed you well. Right? Slaves, they were basically slaves. Slaves had a hard time getting food at all, so they must have been excited that they get such good food. And it looked good, right? Has any man ever seen a steak and said, ew, gross? And if you have, happy Mother's Day. I'm kidding. Listen, they were food that looked good. The Israelites were looking at it and they're like, I want to eat that. And he was slowly introducing little compromise in their life because Nebuchadnezzar knew that if he could change their appetites from the things of God by introducing small compromise, that he would win them over. This is the arrow. Remember the Titanic? 1912, it sank. It was believed it sank because it hit an iceberg that ripped a gigantic crease through the entire hull, making such a big hole that the ship sank so fast. Remember, this was the unsinkable ship. But as they did salvage and work on the Titanic, we found out that that's only partway true. See, the iceberg did not rip through the metal at all. Here's what the iceberg did. It broke 6 rivets inside the hull. It made a hole in the hull, okay, by breaking 6 rivets. And as they looked at these rivets, they found out that they were made of not very strong metal. They were compromised rivets. At the time of building the Titanic, there was a rivet shortage, and they wanted to get the Titanic up and out so fast that they said that they were willing to compromise the quality of the rivets and put those on. The honest truth, if they did not compromise those rivets, it's very likely that the Titanic would not have sunk. Listen to me. 6 tiny rivets sank a 900-foot ship. The enemy knows this. A forest fire is set by one small what? Spark. A dam breaks by a crack. And Nebuchadnezzar and our enemy knows that if he wants to change the foundation and he wants to bring someone down, it always starts one small compromise at a time. Their life is chiseled away one small compromise at a time. It's what he does today. And he does it through TV, through movie, through music, through social media, through peer pressure to our kids. All of those things, he's got these arrows pointed at our kids. And they make these little compromises: lie when necessary, cheat when needed, pursue your own pleasure. These compromises are like, it's not that bad. Right now, if you've got parents of younger kids right now, you've got something in front of you that we have to decide if we're going to compromise on. You guys know that in Florida, if you remember, Florida came out with the legislation that they're not going to teach homosexual agenda to kids 3rd grade and younger, didn't they? And Disney was like, good job, guys. Nope, Disney said, well, if you won't, we will. And they've upped their game with their homosexual agenda inside their movies. And right now there's a movie called Buzz Lightyear. My Buzz Lightyear movie. Came out, and it is, I don't know if you guys know this, but it's got homosexuality all throughout it. It's child grooming from the predators at Disney. That's what this movie is. And we have to decide as a homosexual couple inside of it that you see kiss inside the movie, that our little 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds are gonna see pregnant. It doesn't explain that. It is glorifying this thing. And we have to decide, are we gonna let that little compromise into our kids' life because we love the Toy Story movies? Can I tell you something right now? Toy Story 4 brought in $200 million the very first week it came out. Buzz Lightyear has brought in 50 because there's enough Christians that said, I'm not gonna allow that compromise into my kids' lives. Listen, I look around in America and it's incredible. It's like pornography has become normalized. It's like a normal thing out there. Men walk around with shirts that have pornography on it. At one time, that was looked at sick and wrong and as a sin. But little compromises have come inside of little kids' lives who've grown up to be bigger. We have to be the defense to our kids. The first arrow was the arrow of a new worldview. The second arrow is the arrow of a little compromise. And the third arrow we're gonna look at is found in verses 6 and in verse 7. It says this: Now among them from the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials assigned new names. Say new names. He assigned new names to them. And Daniel, he assigned the name Belshazzar, and Hannah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. Now, this is an interesting arrow. What is this arrow? Well, it's hard for us to understand because names mean different things at that time. This is the arrow of a new identity. Nebuchadnezzar was trying to give them a new identity. See, names don't matter today. We don't really care about names, and you can really see that because why don't you just look at what your kids named their kids? And you can say names don't matter, right? You named your kid Scott, and they named their kid Bubbly Water or something crazy. Bermuda, something. And that's fine because in America, names don't really matter that much. But in Israel, it was totally different. With God's people, it was totally different. Every name contained some form of God in it. Let's look at what these 4 guys' names meant. Daniel, let's put that up. Daniel means God is my judge. Every time the name Daniel was said, it was proclaimed over this man that God is his judge. Every time he wrote it down, every time he introduced himself, he was introducing the identity of who he was. He was someone inside of God. Hananiah meant Yahweh is gracious. Azariah meant Yahweh is a helper. Mishael meant who is what God is. Every time these guys' names were proclaimed, they were proclaiming some truth about God in their lives. It fed to their identity. So Nebuchadnezzar, or the enemy, had to come in and he had to take their identity away and give them something different. These are the names that he gave them. Let's get those other ones up there. To Daniel, remember, God is my judge. He renamed him to Belshazzar, which means Bel, protect his life. And that is a prayer to one of the Babylon gods. And every time his name was talked, and every time he had to write his name or introduce, and every time his name came up, it was a prayer to a Babylonian god over him. Nebuchadnezzar wanted to change who they were. To Hananiah was changed to Shadrach, which meant command of Aku, which is a moon god. Mishael was changed to Meshach, which means who is like Aku, the moon god. And every time they'd be proclaimed over these guys' lives. And Azariah was changed to Abednego, which meant servant of Naboo. And we all know Naboo is the planet that Jar Jar Binks was from in Star Wars. I don't actually even know if that's true. I might have just absolutely offended a Star Wars fan in here. It's Naboo, Neil. I don't know what it is. Nabu is actually the god of vegetation. And Nebuchadnezzar was trying to feed them a new identity. Do you guys see that happening with kids today? Reminds me of a story. This man had lost his job. And he was looking for a new job, and he sees in the newspaper a job listing for the zoo, so he goes to the interview, and they hire him on the spot. And he's like, that's great, but I don't actually know what the job is. You just said to work at the zoo, and they said, this is a special job. We couldn't tell on the newspaper what it was. Our gorilla died, and we need someone to get in this gorilla costume and sit in the very back of the area with the whatever that thing's called, the enclosure, while Amazon brings us the new gorilla, or whoever does gorilla stuff. Probably Amazon. Bezos would probably be into that. Okay, and we just need you to sit there and sleep and eat bananas. And the guy's like, I was made for this job. So he gets in the gorilla costume, and the first day was great. He got to catch up on all this sleep. And the second day he wasn't tired, but there was this never-ending supply of bananas. But by the third day, he was completely bored. And so he would walk around the exhibit a little bit, and he noticed that the more he walked around and the more he moved, the more people would come to the exhibit. And so he decided one day to climb a tree, and all these people got in, and they were shouting and throwing him peanuts, and it was such a good change from bananas. And he saw that the higher he would climb, the more people would come up, and the more, someone's really liking this. And so he decided he'd swing from one of the branches, and he started swinging from this vine, and the higher he would swing, the more excited the crowd would get, the more people would come, the more peanuts they would throw, until one day he's swinging as high as he can, and the vine breaks, and he flies out of the exhibit of the gorilla into the lion exhibit. And he looks up, and there's this huge lion, this just huge face, 15 feet, just staring at him. And he jumps up and he yells, "Help! Help, I'm really a man in a gorilla costume." Right as the lion pounces on him, shoves his shoulders down and says, "Shut up, you're gonna get us both fired." I love that story. But here's the deal. That's such a good story. Here's the deal. She really liked that one too. Here's the deal. That's what we see happening a lot inside of America, inside of our youth. We've got all these kids that are walking around, and they look right on the inside, but their identity's been stolen. A lot of us, we look at our kids and we can see something's wrong, something's going on inside, because the enemy is out to steal who God has created them to be. He's got his arrows pointed at our kids to steal their identity. You know, some of our kids, something has happened inside of their life, and they've felt something happen where they were rejected by someone, and the enemy says, of course you're rejected. You'll always be rejected. No one likes you. In fact, no one could ever like you. And they're shriveling up, and they're starting to take on the identity of rejected. Or something happened where they didn't feel loved, and the enemy comes in and he whispers his lies, and he tells them it's because you're unlovable. There's nothing about you that can be loved. You're just here, and everyone's going to take advantage of you because you're you. And they start taking this new identity because they've got the arrow sticking out of their back of the enemy trying to change their identity. And he's good at it. And we need to be aware of those arrows that the enemy sends at our kids, so that they will not get a new worldview, so that they will not get a compromise into their life, so that they will not have the identity that the enemy gives them. God has already given them an incredible, wonderful identity. So here's the deal. God knew that the enemy was going to do these things, didn't he? In fact, God knew what the arrows of the enemy were before the enemy ever found these arrows, didn't he? And he did something with our kids because he knew he had to help our kids against what Satan is going to try to pull on them. And he could have done anything, let me tell you. God could have done anything he wanted. He looked at these kids and he knew he had to give them some type of defense. What did he pick? Well, he could have picked anything. Harry Potter's wand, right? Harry Potter's wand. Every one of our kids get one. They're like, "Como te llama?" I don't know any Harry Potter sayings, but I know a little bit of Spanish. And when you say it, it sounds like an incantation, right? Donde el baño? And he could have given them something like that, but he didn't. He could have looked out and given them anything. He could have given them Captain America. And yes, some of you mothers wish that he did. He could have given him anything, but you know what he chose? When he looked out and he knew the arrows were going to be flying, he chose something to protect them. He gave them parents. He gave them parents. Namely, he gave them a father as the head of the family. Fathers, look at me right now. I want to tell you something right now. In a world that wants to say that you don't matter anymore, I want you to hear me right now. You are a shield to your families. You are a shield to your kids. God has placed you, yes, God has placed you in between the arrows of the evil one and your kids. He's made you a shield. Proverbs 4:1 says this. It says, "Hear, O sons, the instructions of a father, and give attention." Why? Why, sons, hear the instructions? Why give attention? So that you may gain understanding. The enemy sends his arrows of empty truths, of lies. He sends his arrows of manipulation. The Bible says, fathers, do not provoke your kids to anger. Why would a father provoke his kids to anger? Because when a father decides he's not going to be the shield and he walks away, the kids are left with misunderstandings, with lies that have been given to them. And when they get into the real life, they realize that everything that they've been fed by this world is empty and it breaks down and it only brings depression and anxiety and decrease, and they are left angry. But when a father takes his stand as a shield, that's when we see great things happen in these kids' life. And you know what I'm not saying? I'm not saying that we can shield every arrow, am I? Because the truth is, we've all got those kids that are like, "What's that?" Bonk, right? It's the truth. We can do what we can. And we have to hope that what we've trained our kids, as we are a defense against the enemy, we're also giving them understanding. We have to believe that their understanding is going to take root and they're going to be able to defend themselves as well. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Listen, we are fathers. You are your kids' first line of defense. Truth is this too. They've got other levels of defense, and you know, the defense of grandparents and education, and all these things around them. And the truth is that we could be doing our job really well, but we also have to focus on all of the areas around them. Home, can I tell you guys right now? Home is not, dads, home is not where you go to wind down after a long day at work. Home is where we do our most important work. Do you know that? Home isn't where I go because I'm tired from the 9 or 8 or 15 hours that I worked. Home is where I go to do the real work, the most important work. Yeah. The world wants to minimize your importance. It wants to stamp out the importance of fatherhood. It wants to demonize masculinity. TVs and movies are set out to make fathers look like imbeciles, aren't they? There's a cultural war on fatherhood. Why? Because the enemy wants to get rid of those kids' shield. That's why. Let's have the band up right now. That's why it wants to get rid of their shield. But when we look at statistics on fatherlessness, what do we find? We find decrease. We find hurt and sorrow, anxiety, depression, and our jails are filled with it because you cannot replace the shield. The enemy will get them. All right, fathers, I want you to listen to me right now. I want you to hear something. I want to say something, and all the mothers in here, we want to say something to you. In a world that puts you down, every show you turn on, and in the craziness of the political, demasculate world, I want to tell you something, and the mothers in here want to tell you something, that if you're in here on church on Father's Day and you're not out golfing or fishing or surfing, we all want to say, good job being a shield. I want you to know that. I want you to hear this. If you have moved your kids into some sort of Christian education, I want you to hear this: good job being a shield. If you love your wife and your kids know it, good job being a shield. If you love your kids and they feel it, good job being a shield. If your kids see you pray, if they know you read your Bible, good job being a shield. You're training them up in the right way. If you make youth group more important than soccer practice, oh man, good job being a shield. I'll tell you this, for me, there's no greater role or calling in my life than fatherhood. I take it more serious than anything else in my life. Why? Because God has placed me in between the devil's arrows and my kids. And I am going to try to let next to no arrows go by. Let's stand up right now. Listen, this is our time in our service where we get to respond to what God's doing. We get to respond on how God's moving. And first, let me just say that God may be doing anything in you at all, and it may have nothing to do with the message. You may have come here with some type of need inside of your life. And if that's the case, we want to make sure that you have time. This is the time where you can come and you can ask the supernatural power of God to come into our natural circumstances. You may be pained at something going on and you just need God to move inside of your life for you. That is this time right now. Do not miss the time where you can call on him to come be your Savior. We've got a whole ministry team that will come and pray for you. And we have these kneeling benches if you want to talk to God on your own. But I want to also give another one. And you can come up. You don't even have to wait till I'm done, okay? If God's moving on you, do not let any pastor up here strip that time or steal that time because we're still talking. Come up and do your business with God when he calls. And here's the other thing I want to do. I want to say specifically, I want to reach out to you guys. If you're in here and you're saying, you know what? I need to be more of a shield. You're in here with your spouse and you say, we need to be a better shield. I want to take my parenting more seriously than I did before. I want to stand in the place where God has called me between the devil and his arrows that are going to fly at my kids, and I want to block them all. If you want to up your game as a parent, I want to encourage you to come down. You can kneel right here. You can make a commitment to God. You can stand right there and you can get prayer. Maybe you're a grandparent. Let me just tell you, grandparent still has a name parent in it. And many of the grandparents in here still have a lot of stock in raising their grandkids. Maybe you want to say, I want to do a better job. I want to stand in the place in a better way. I don't want to let the arrows get by me. Then maybe you need to ask God. Something that Heather and I have asked, my wife and I have asked God many times. We've asked him, God, will you parent where we can't parent? Would you show us the things inside of our kids that we can't see? Would you be with them in those pivotal moments where we're not there? Where someone from their neighborhood shows them something and we don't even know about it? Maybe you need to ask God, I've been trying to parent long enough, and I need you to enter into my parenting with me. Go ahead and come up and ask for prayer.